Christ hath redeemed us from the curse of the law, being made a curse for us. For it is written, Cursed is everyone that hangeth on a tree. Galatians 3:13. Hey y'all, Wagwan, it's me, V. Welcome back to my channel, Ashes to Ashe, where I discuss Black liberation and decolonization through critical thinking, radical spirituality, and challenging the status quo. I'm happy to have you here. Check out the links in my bio for my Insta, TikTok, and to schedule a tarot reading with me. Today, I want to talk about why Black liberation requires spiritual decolonization and how spiritual warfare has been used to ensure our subjugation through lifetimes. To start, the quote. So, Galatians 3:13, Christ hath redeemed us redeemed us from the curse of the law, being made a curse for us, for it is written, Cursed is everyone that hangeth on a tree. Now, I'm going to have to say, who is us? If Jesus was a Black Palestinian with hair like wool and skin like bronze, this makes sense. But cursed is everyone that hangeth on a tree. So this was a verse that was brought to my attention quite a few years ago when I was consciously decolonizing my spirituality. I was raised Christian, however, this was not a verse that was ever brought to my attention, and the way that I rolled in church, I would have had every and all the questions, and got in trouble for it. But yeah, this is a quote that, as I said, was recently brought to my attention, and when I first heard it, it immediately brought two things to mind. The first being the great American pastime and sport, the lynching of Black Americans in the Deep South, and the burning of crosses by the great Christian American Christian organization, the Ku Klux Klan. When the Ku Klux Klan, wanted to terrorize, wanted to terrify, wanted to ensure that a Black family knew their place, they burned crosses, right? They burned the image globally for Christians, all over the world, of what represented their salvation. The cross, specifically the bear cross, represents for Christians globally their salvation. It represents the blameless Son of God, the sacrificial lamb, Jesus Christ, not only being the scapegoat for the world, but his resurrection and thus his salvation. And that is what they used to, again, terrify, to terrorize, and to ensure the domination, the control, and the subjugation of Black folks. Why? Why is this image of the perfect, sinless, Son of God, the salvation of all mankind, used as a tool of racial oppression? Why? Why is this the same religion that was forced with the threat of death upon not only the descendants of, but the Africans that were kidnapped and enslaved in America? Why is this the same religion that their enslavers would, go to Sunday service and worship and, preach and cry out to God while they had enslaved Africans chained in the basements underneath? Why? Is this the same reason why our currency, our dollar bill, says, "In God we trust"? It has an all-seeing eye, kind of like a all-knowing, all-seeing, vengeful, jealous God that you should be afraid of? Is it the same reason why all of these dollar bills have these American presidents who we know them as the founding fathers, but you could even call them the ancestors of America, who also in turn committed heinous human rights violations, genocides, etc., etc.? Why? This is spiritual warfare. This is spiritual domination and subjugation. Once you have, for lack of a better word, enslaved somebody's spirit, you have enslaved their mind, you have enslaved their body. For me, the spirit is just that, right? It represents the spirit, the connection to the divine. It represents love. It represents hope. The mind is more than logic or reason, but it's imagination, right? It's forward thinking. It's possibility. And the body is the will, the instrument of the spirit, and then the mind, right? The enslavement of our spirit ensured not just the enslavement of our minds and our bodies, but of generations and generations of Black folks to come. It represented the enslavement of our culture, of our customs. Our oppression required spiritual subjugation. It required the demonizing of our practices, the demonizing of our religions, the demonizing and the dehumanization of not just us, but our cultures, our customs, of our humanity, which were intrinsically tied to our spiritual beliefs, our spiritual understanding of the world, to our connection to our own divinity and sense of self. It's no coincidence for me that the same God that is a jealous God, that is a vengeful God, that is a God that you don't want to piss him off because he will make some shit shake, is the same God that at one point or another my ancestors cried out to for their salvation, for their liberation, that has provided no justice. True nature of our subjugation, which is spiritual first and foremost. As a result, our liberation requires spiritual decolonization, if not spiritual warfare. I've mentioned Haiti before and how they got their liberation, or one of the tools that was used in the liberation of Haiti. But I think for Black Americans, the liberation of our spirits and the spirits and the spiritual energies that we align ourselves with have to, if not completely change, shift for our liberation. If God is an angry God, who is he angry at? Who should he be angry at? If God is a vengeful God, then what is justice for Black Americans, for Black folks globally, look like? How does our understanding of Jesus, for example, have to change in order to secure our liberation, right? To my understanding, that Islam is a religion that specifically requires its adherents, its believers, its worshipers to fight for the oppressed. It is a religion that specifically outlines and states and requires that if you see harm being done, baby, you got to go do something about that harm. Versus a religion that I was taught, my passivity was to be rewarded, right? That then bled into the culture, right? Black folks, it's not a coincidence that we're taught that Jesus is passive. He wasn't. Like, he was flipping over tables. Like, that nigga got active. You know what I'm saying? Like, because our oppression has not just been economic, financial, or physical, the first step is understanding not only the nature of the spiritual warfare that has been committed against us, understanding the anatomy of the spiritual warfare that has been committed against us, and how to reclaim our spiritual power. In order to liberate our bodies, our lives, we must liberate our minds, our imaginations, what we can envision life to look like outside and apart from the colonial context, right? This framework that has been imposed upon us, and that requires us to liberate ourselves spiritually. We have been removed and distanced from a spiritual power that we were only removed from because it holds the key to our liberation and is what makes us so incredibly powerful. Once we are able to liberate ourselves spiritually, we liberate our destiny. Black liberation requires spiritual liberation, which requires spiritual decolonization. Questions to consider. What does a God that is wholly invested in the justice, the liberation, the salvation of Black Americans look like in values, in temperament, in spirit? Do you believe you can truly worship a God and follow a doctrine as those who ensure, require, and delight in your subjugation and dehumanization? How can you, and in what ways are you willing to challenge your ideas about God, about a higher power, a benevolent spiritual force? And what ways are you not willing to yet? Because that's okay. Sometimes, things take time. And last but not least, if we, the original people, were made and are made in the image of God, what does God look like? And what is God willing to do for our liberation? And thus, what are you willing to do for our liberation? Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I would love to hear your comments in the comment. How are you decolonizing your spirituality? How have you decolonized your spirituality? What roadblocks have you encountered in decolonizing your spirituality? And what is something that you want to hold on to and retain if and through this journey of decolonization? Thank you so much for joining me. I look forward to seeing you soon. I hope you're well. Peace.